10 years. That's how long it now takes to become British. For millions of migrants, what was once a 5-year journey to permanent residency has just doubled overnight. The UK's new immigration law doesn't just change paperwork, it reshapes lives, futures, and entire communities. Supporters argue that it was a necessary filter to ensure only the most committed stay. Critics now warn it's a slow grind that traps people into uncertainty for a decade. Either way, UK citizenship now takes 10 years, and for migrants, the road to belonging has never looked longer. You hear the phrase, taking back control of our borders, and you're suddenly transported back to 2016. This slogan was popularised by the Leave campaign that believed that the only way to save the United Kingdom was to exit the European Union. Their efforts resulted in Brexit, marking a new era in the country's history. Proponents of the Leave campaign believed that the EU was giving too many liberties to people who didn't deserve them. Namely, they challenged the legitimacy of the free movement principle that allowed immigrants from EU member states to jump from one nation to another. This resulted in net immigration into the UK rising and further alienating Eurosceptics. This graph from the Consumer Data Research Centre tracked immigration into and emigration out of the UK from 2009 through 2019. You'll notice a rise in immigration that continued on until 2016 before dipping. That'd mark the Brexit referendum. However, you'll also notice immigration spiking again and again and again. Why is that? You see, Brexit ended the free movement and it reduced immigration. However, it only lowered it from one facet: EU member nations. Non-EU immigration had an opportunity to surge during this time, and it did. For some perspective, the health and services industry saw a labour shortage in the aftermath of Brexit. 1. Eastern Europeans returned home, and 2. British citizens weren't ready to take up the low-paying positions. This meant that they became industries where skilled workers were needed. So in the aftermath of Brexit, the British government announced a new points-based system. With several industries now facing labour shortages, immigrants who filled these roles were readily given visas. In effect, immigration wasn't curbed and no one took back control of anything. Ironically, data from the Office for National Statistics showed that between 2023 and 2024, total net migration reached record highs, peaking at around 745,000 in 2022 and 672,000 in 2023. These unexpectedly high numbers fueled public debate, with both Conservative and Labour politicians facing criticism for failing to reduce immigration despite years of pledges. Reports often focused on overstretched hospitals struggling to meet demand, particularly in the NHS, where waiting time for GP appointments, A&E services, and specialist care were increasing. This narrative fed into broader public concern that rising immigration was making it harder for existing residents to access timely healthcare. Reports shifted from how migrants were being a burden on the UK's health system, housing market, and welfare system. All in all, the problem was the UK's generous immigration policy. What was this policy? Briefly, before the May 2025 reforms, most migrants in the UK could apply for indefinite leave to remain or ILR after 5 years of continuous qualifying residence. ILR status allowed individuals to live, work, study, access benefits if eligible, and provided a foundation for British citizenship usually 1 year later. Once granted, ILR typically remained valid unless the holder left the UK for 2 consecutive years or 5 years for EU settlement scheme beneficiaries. Because of growing concern, the Labour government proposed a plan to restore immigration to sustainable levels. This plan was elaborated in the Restoring Control over the Immigration System White Paper, published in May of 2025. Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the White Paper a clean break, while criticising past open-door immigration policies. In order to bring down immigration, the paper suggested, among other things, to increase the settlement timeline for ILR from 5 to 10 years. There was, however, a contribution-based fast-track model, but all in all, the White Paper was designed to make immigration more stringent. Lastly, new overseas recruitment for adult social care roles was effectively banned, and the existing ones would expire within the next 3 years. Ministers argued the reform will restore confidence in the system, reduce net migration from its peak of nearly 906,000 to more manageable levels, and ensure settlement is seen as a privilege rather than a given. 906,000, that's right. And you can see it for yourself in this graph here. The next question is obviously that of implementation. Labour has proposed that the full force of this proposal will be seen over the course of its term, that is, from 2025 through 2029. However, some of these proposals will come into effect immediately. Social care visas, post-study period, and increase RQF level. As far as the most contentious of the proposals is concerned, the 10-year settlement period, it'll likely take a little longer. The entire timeline so far has not been disclosed. Settlement is to be earned, it's not a right. Supporters of the White Paper, including Tory MP Kemi Badenoch, believe that Labour responded both timely and appropriately to a pressing concern. Immigration to the UK has reached record highs, and it's time to curb it. While the White Paper would make it harder for immigrants to settle in the UK, that's too bad. It was designed to make it harder. Labour and Conservative voices alike emphasise that settlement is a privilege, not a right. It should be earned through meaningful economic and social contribution. Badenoch went on to suggest that the policy will relieve pressures on public services, longer qualifying periods mean prolonged temporary status, generating more visa fees and NHS surcharge revenues before migrants gain entitlements to certain benefits, helping fund domestic infrastructure. This graph from Migration Observatory's Fiscal Impact of Immigration report shows the net fiscal contributions of migrants to the UK based on visa type and time spent in the country. It illustrates that work visa holders, particularly those on skilled worker and health and care routes, consistently contribute positively to public finances. Most importantly, supporters believe that it's necessary to restore long-term public confidence in the immigration system. For years, British governments have struggled to manage voter concerns about rising migration levels and the perceived speed at which migrants were able to secure permanent residency. Many policymakers believe that a longer settlement period better reflects the level of commitment expected from those who wish to make the UK their permanent home. But where there are supporters, there are bound to be critics as well. Nesreen Malik, a British Sudanese journalist, author and columnist for The Guardian, published an op-ed in June 2025 in response to the 10-year proposal. The article was named, "I Got British Citizenship via the 5-year route. Labour's new 10-year rule will cause untold pain." Malik discussed how this extension will erode trust, create dependency on employers, and accumulate tens of thousands in system fees before achieving stability. She described it as climbing a crumbling staircase, subjecting migrants to long periods in precarious immigration limbo with restricted rights and mobility. Critics also believe that this new system will force many migrants into repeated visa renewals, creating significant financial and emotional strain. Lower-paid workers, especially care workers performing vital yet low-wage roles, would struggle to meet these strict financial benchmarks. IPPR research highlights that such policies could increase poverty, workplace exploitation, and housing insecurity, particularly affecting families with British citizen children. Additionally, many migrants could lose legal status entirely, expanding the undocumented population and creating administrative challenges for the already stretched Home Office. According to IPPR and similar think tanks, it'd be better to adopt a fairer strategy focused on transparency, contribution, and community cohesion. Public support leans towards policies that allow migrants to settle and contribute rather than those that fuel division. At a time when public confidence in immigration depends as much on perception as policy, a transparent, inclusive settlement strategy would better serve both political stability and social unity. The debate ultimately comes down to finding a balance between keeping control of the borders, maintaining public trust, and protecting the rights of migrants. Those in favour say it's a smart way to make sure immigration lines up with the country's priorities. They argue that it rewards people who truly contribute to the economy and society, while also bringing in extra revenue through visa fees and surcharges. Critics see it very differently. They believe it unfairly penalises people who have already spent years living and working in the UK, forcing them to spend more money, face more uncertainty, and live with the stress of constantly renewing visas. In the long run, they argue, this approach could actually make it harder for migrants to fully integrate and weaken the economy and social fabric of the country. There is a workaround to the 10-year settlement amendment. You have to show the government your long-term social and economic commitment towards the United Kingdom. Those are your two options. You either have to contribute through a decade-long process or appease the government that you'll do it. This fast-tracking option basically suggests that high-contributing migrants will qualify for indefinite leave to remain much sooner, possibly maintaining the previous 5-year period. Eligibility for fast-tracking hinges on accumulated points-based contributions, though precise thresholds are yet to be defined. Understandably, this option will only be extended to certain immigrants. About 4 million people held temporary visas at the end of 2024, of which approximately half, around 2.1 million, were on a pathway to settlement. Most of these are work visa holders, roughly 1.4 million, who could qualify for fast-track settlement if they meet contribution criteria. Other major eligible groups include investors, business, and global talent visa holders, around 38,000. Refugees or humanitarian migrants, around 207,000. Hong Kong BNO visa holders, around 189,000. And family visa applicants, around 313,000. A few details of the settlement scheme are yet to be worked out, including whether or not the decade-long rule will apply to immigrants who are already on the 5-year path. However, what we do know for sure is that family members and dependents will have to wait longer. Partners and children of British citizens will remain on a 5-year settlement track, but family migrants of holders with ILR may not be so fortunate. With approximately 313,000 active family visas, a significant group may soon face a 10-year wait. Besides immigrants who've displayed capabilities beyond doubt that they would contribute to the economic and social well-being of the UK, there are other exceptions to the rule as well. While the new laws fully apply to refugees and humanitarian migrants remains uncertain, the paper does suggest that some vulnerable groups would continue under the 5-year settlement timeline. The proposal will not retroactively affect EU settlement scheme beneficiaries whose rights are protected under the UK-EU withdrawal agreement. However, it remains unclear whether existing non-EU migrants on 5-year routes will face new rules or be grandfathered in. Compared globally, adopting a 10-year route places the UK among the stricter high-income countries, but looking at Switzerland and Japan shows mixed results. In Switzerland, permanent residency usually requires 10 years of continuous residence, though early settlement is possible under certain integration criteria. Switzerland balances this with strong local integration programs, language requirements, and close cooperation between migrants and local authorities. While the long timeline can create pressure for migrants, the Swiss system emphasizes steady integration, reducing undocumented populations, and ensuring those who settle are well-established contributors to society. Japan, meanwhile, maintains even longer default timelines with very few exceptions. Japan's restrictive approach has contributed to its extremely low overall immigration levels. While it has succeeded in maintaining tight border control and low migration flows, Japan faces serious economic challenges, including labor shortages and an aging population. Its strict settlement rules have made it harder to attract and retain foreign workers in key sectors, forcing recent modest reforms to open more limited pathways for certain skilled workers. This graph displays a visual timeline of how Japan maintains strict settlement rules while gradually allowing temporary labor programs. For the UK, a 10-year route could reduce the pace of settlement but risks similar challenges. Prolonged temporary status may discourage long-term integration, limit migrants' economic stability, and create administrative burdens. Unlike Switzerland or Japan, the UK relies more heavily on migrant labour in key industries like healthcare and care work, raising concerns that stricter settlement timelines might deter needed workers. Immigration anxiety is a thing. According to a 2025 Ipsos survey, 67% of Britons believe immigration numbers are too high, with 43% saying they're much too high. The fact of the matter is that immigration has jumped back to the top of the list of issues people worry about, reaching levels of concern we haven't seen since the Brexit debate in 2016. A lot of this anxiety centers on asylum seekers and refugees, but many are also uneasy about family migration and, to a lesser extent, work-related visas. That being said, people aren't completely against immigration across the board. When it comes to skilled workers, most of the public actually supports bringing them in. They recognize the important roles these migrants play in keeping key services running. So while there's definitely a strong push for tighter overall controls, especially with recent record migration numbers, many Brits still believe that immigration can be a good thing as long as it's carefully managed and focused on areas where the UK really needs help. It's still too early to tell what will happen as a result of the UK's proposed extended settlement scheme. If it goes according to plan, the scheme will stabilise net migration, reshape migrant behaviours and career trajectories, and most importantly, restore public faith in the government. Proponents believe there's hope for the new law, whereas critics believe that it's a disaster waiting to happen. They are arguing that the new law is designed to complicate an already complicated procedure, making it virtually impossible for immigrants to secure ILR for the UK. For now, the debate continues, with migrants, policymakers and voters all waiting to see how these sweeping changes play out.